It was a clear spring morning in a modest suburban neighborhood when life changed forever for everyone involved. The sun rose softly over tidy lawns and shuttered windows, casting a warm glow on the streets where neighbors began their daily routines. Birds chirped on telephone wires as if nothing ominous was brewing. A top police captain, known for decades of service and respected among peers, finished his morning patrol briefing. He donned his crisp uniform, polished badge reflecting the first rays of light, and headed out in his cruiser, unaware that the day would shatter reputations and alter countless lives. Several blocks away, a Hispanic man named Miguel prepared for another day's challenges. Born with a neuromuscular condition, he moved slowly across the worn linoleum floor of his small apartment, aiding himself with a sturdy walker and the help of well-practiced routines. He had lived quietly for years, known by neighbors as gentle and kind, often volunteering to deliver meals to elderly residents hours before sunrise. On this morning, he planned to grab groceries at the corner store, secure in the knowledge that his disability demanded extra care but never invited fear. Unbeknownst to Miguel, the culture around law enforcement was simmering with tension. A recent string of media reports had spotlighted instances of excessive force, particularly in communities of color. Social media buzzed with hashtags calling for police accountability. Still, the idea that a decorated captain would act violently felt unthinkable. As Miguel shuffled across the street, the captain pulled onto the same block, eyes scanning for any hint of trouble. It was a routine assignment, a drive through quiet streets, a quick coffee stop at the local diner. Everything seemed ordinary, until it wasn't. In the final moments before tragedy struck, neighbors were oblivious. Some stood at windows sipping coffee, half asleep. Others watered lawn flowers, humming softly. Cars cruised in and out of driveways. But beneath the calm facade, unseen forces were about to collide, a man striving for dignity despite physical limitations, and an officer whose judgment that morning would cloud into something neither expected nor forgivable. The first domino fell when the captain's cruiser idled next to Miguel. Nothing about the man's demeanor hinted at guilt or wrongdoing. And yet, as destiny would have it, that peaceful street would soon become the stage for a violent betrayal of trust and humanity. By the time the sun crept higher overhead, the neighborhood's innocence would be shattered. Families would question whether safety existed anywhere, and a community would unite to demand answers when an image, captured on a simple smartphone, would ignite outrage on a scale nobody could predict. Harsh reality: no one knew exactly when the neighbors first noticed something was off. One block over, a woman stepped out onto her porch to retrieve fresh linens from the clothesline. As she bent down to gather sheets, she caught sight of a police cruiser parked oddly at the curb. The captain's door stood open, and his posture seemed tense in a way that sent shivers down her spine. She grabbed her phone instinctively, as if drawn by intuition that something urgent was unfolding. A gentle breeze rustled the trees as birds paused mid-song, sensing a disturbance. At that moment, Miguel struggled to open the door to the corner store. His walker rattled lightly on the pavement as he maneuvered himself toward the entrance. He wore a pale blue shirt and faded jeans, looking every bit the unassuming man he was, someone whose biggest offense earlier that morning had been stepping out to buy bread and milk. Neither Miguel nor the captain could foresee the next few seconds would be recorded and changed both their lives irrevocably. The captain approached with eyes locked on Miguel's wheelchair. Something inside him snapped. Whether it was latent frustration, bias, or a momentary lapse in humanity, we may never know. Without warning, he seized Miguel's wheelchair, yanked it backward, and pushed him forcefully to the pavement. The neighbor's phone recorded the exact instant Miguel hit the ground, his hand flailing as he tried to steady himself. The camera's red flashing light etched a clear, silent warning. Record. This matters. The force of the blow echoing in the neighbor's earpiece was visceral and immediate. Miguel cried out, his voice a guttural mix of surprise and pain, when he realized his world had become something brutal and unrecognizable. The captain, fists clenched, landed repeated blows to Miguel's torso and face even as the man lay defenseless. Blood pooled on the asphalt. With every strike, the captain betrayed the oath he had sworn, an oath sworn to protect all citizens, including the most vulnerable. From behind drawn curtains, other neighbors scrambled to their windows. Phones flickered on in the soft morning light as multiple recordings began to capture the scene from different angles. Some neighbors dialed 911, their voices catching on tremors of disbelief. It took mere seconds for the unfolding brutality to become a panicked collective realization. This was not a mere scuffle over a traffic violation. This was a violent, unprovoked assault against a disabled Hispanic man, and it was happening in broad daylight. After what seemed an eternity but lasted less than a minute, the captain staggered back, straightened his uniform, and barked at Miguel to stay down. Grabbing his hat, he limped to his cruiser and sped away, leaving Miguel bleeding on the asphalt. The neighbor who captured the footage stood petrified, heart hammering, phone shaking. She whispered into the camera, "He's a disabled man. He can't fight back." The implications were clear. This was a hate crime waiting to be recognized, a betrayal of public trust recorded in crisp, unblinking pixels. When the smoke of shock cleared, the footage rippled across social media with relentless force. News outlets pounced on the raw images. Activists circulated the clip under hashtags like #JusticeForMiguel. Online communities erupted in fury. And within hours, the question on everyone's lips became, how could a decorated captain, someone trained to uphold justice, reduce a defenseless man to a bloody heap on the street? Life before the attack, before police sirens and #outrage defined his life, Miguel's days were a testament to perseverance and dignity. Born with spinal muscular atrophy, he had endured countless surgeries and therapies since childhood. His parents, immigrants who arrived with little more than hope and determination, instilled in him a relentless work ethic and an unshakable belief in kindness. As a teenager, Miguel adapted to a manual wheelchair, learning early that doors sometimes closed to him, but he refused to let that extinguish his spirit. Growing up in a tight-knit Hispanic community, he became known for his generosity and unwavering loyalty to neighbors. At 18, he took a job at a downtown restaurant wiping tables. After saving enough to buy adaptive technology, he enrolled in community college courses for accountancy. Every paycheck went toward tuition and his parents' medical bills. His ability to speak English and Spanish made him a valuable translator at local clinics, where he volunteered countless hours on weekends. By his mid-20s, Miguel had founded a small nonprofit that delivered homemade meals to homebound seniors. That program, funded by bake sales and neighborhood donations, became a lifeline for dozens of elderly residents. Neighbors often recalled seeing him push his wheelchair up steep sidewalks, determinedly seeking out isolated seniors regardless of rain or shine. They admired his gentle way of offering hope to those who felt forgotten. He had a cousin named Rosa, 3 years younger and full of life, who doted on him. Together, they attended Sunday Mass, where they sang hymns and shared coffee afterward with their parents. Miguel had dreams. He planned to expand his nonprofit into a borough-wide service, partnering with local grocers to reduce food insecurity. He wanted to buy a small house near the park so his parents could finally retire. All of these aspirations were tied to his independence, which he protected fiercely, celebrating every regained inch of mobility after grueling therapy sessions. On the morning of the attack, Miguel had woken at dawn, completed a delicate set of wrist exercises to strengthen his hands, and arranged his medication. He donned the same blue shirt he often wore, consciously choosing color to reflect calm and resilience. Later that morning, he would pause at the corner store to greet Mrs. Hernandez, an elderly neighbor, and pick up milk for his mother's coffee. He never suspected that, in those few steps, his life would veer from ordinary to nightmarish. In many ways, Miguel embodied the American ideal: perseverance despite adversity, giving back without expectation of reward, and treating everyone with dignity. It was precisely this dignity that made the assault against him so shocking, a violent attempt to strip him of everything he represented. For the Hispanic community, his story struck a chord. They saw in him not just a victim of brutality, but a symbol of everything that good people could lose when those sworn to protect betrayed their duty. Robert Martinez, no relation to Miguel, had spent nearly 2 decades with the same police department. Recruited fresh out of the academy for his athleticism and leadership potential, he quickly ascended the ranks, earning commendations for drug busts and undercover operations. Colleagues often described him as decisive, no-nonsense, and deeply loyal to his precinct. Yet there were whispers, quiet conversations about an untempered temper, a willingness to push tough love tactics on suspects, especially those of color. Early in his career, Martinez had received accolades for coordinating a sting that netted several high-profile traffickers. A photo in the department newsletter showed him smiling behind bars, arms crossed in a pose suggesting authority. He became a role model for younger officers, expected to mold their own careers after his. His family was proud, a wife who taught 3rd grade and 2 children in college. Church groups lauded his volunteer work coaching youth basketball on weekends. Few imagined this same officer capable of unprovoked violence. Beneath the polished veneer, though, tension simmered. Internal affairs records, later uncovered, revealed 2 prior complaints regarding excessive force. Both were dismissed after insufficient evidence. Witnesses in one case, an off-duty altercation with a young Latino man at a gas station, had promised to keep quiet in exchange for lenient charges. In another, a teenage protester accused Martinez of using derogatory slurs while making an arrest. Colleagues recalled that he often bragged about maintaining order at any cost, but nobody spoke publicly about potential racial bias until the morning he attacked Miguel. That day, Martinez clocked in at 6:30 a.m. He completed roll call, exchanged banter with fellow officers, and nodded curtly when asked about the investigative report on police reforms. In his mind, maintaining order meant being tough, an attitude he apparently applied indiscriminately. His morning drive felt routine. Coffee, routine patrol, check on downtown traffic conditions. Reports say he saw Miguel approaching the corner store and felt a surge of irritation over the man's slow pace. Though why he fixated on a harmless pedestrian remains a question still debated. When the assault occurred, the captain's reputation collapsed instantly. A man of his rank, publicly honored just months earlier for community service excellence, now faced allegations so egregious they defied explanation. His subordinates were stunned. Some expressed sympathy privately, suggesting maybe it was a momentary lapse. Others whispered of seeing his simmering frustration on the streets for years, but never imagining it would manifest in such a violent act. Within hours, Martinez was suspended without pay. His badge, once a symbol of authority and respect, hung powerless in evidence lockup. Public reaction was swift. Citizens who had praised him as a hometown hero now demanded answers. How could a trusted captain become a perpetrator of hate? And more importantly, what would it mean for the future of policing if one of their own could descend into such brutality without immediate consequence? First upload appeared just 30 minutes after the assault. Instagram user @NeighborWatch posted a shaky video clip, barely 20 seconds long, capturing the most brutal moments: the wheelchair's sudden topple, Miguel's seat collapsing onto the pavement, and Martinez's raised fist connecting with flesh. A single line of text accompanied the post: Captain Martinez caught beating a disabled man for no reason. Unbelievable. Within minutes, shares multiplied into the hundreds. On Twitter, hashtags escalated rapidly. Hashtag Captain Down, hashtag Justice for Miguel, hashtag Police Violence. Comments poured in from across the nation, each one more furious than the last. Some viewers called for immediate suspension, others demanded murder charges. A local news crew scrambled to find eyewitnesses, while popular bloggers boasted scoops, feeding live stream traffic to sites hungry for views. Teenagers at nearby high schools retweeted the clip, their outrage echoing in retorts like, "How could he do this?" and "When is America going to wake up?" Within an hour, the video landed on YouTube channels specializing in exposing police misconduct. Content creators added dramatic narration. Watch as a decorated captain brutally assaults a helpless victim. They looped the footage, slowed it down, and highlighted every moment of violence. Millions watched as the clip spread from personal feeds to national headlines. Even casual browsers scrolling through their social apps couldn't escape it. Algorithms pushed it to the top of trending lists. Meanwhile, dedicated activist groups coordinated online. An emergency protest was scheduled via a Facebook event titled, "Stand with Miguel, End Police Hate Now." Over 10,000 people clicked, going within 2 hours. Fundraising pages appeared on GoFundMe, soliciting donations for Miguel's medical bills and legal defense. Daily updates kept donors engaged. Miguel is stable but needs surgery. Attorney hired to pursue civil rights claim. Press conference scheduled for tomorrow at City Hall. Influential voices weighed in. A prominent civil rights attorney tweeted, "If you think this is isolated, think again. This sort of brutality against disabled communities is rampant." A nationally syndicated columnist wrote, "We've seen it before: power unchecked, hate unmasked. Today, a video saves Miguel from anonymity." Television anchors broadcast the footage on evening news cycles, commentators debating whether the assault qualified as a hate crime or simple brutality. By sunset, the social media fervor showed no signs of slowing. Local politicians scrambled to release statements condemning the act. Some urged patience until a full investigation, while others seized the moment to promise policy reforms. Religious leaders called for calm but demanded justice. We pray for the victim, they said, but we also stand against hatred in all forms. The digital landscape crackled with energy, each retweet and comment fueling the fire. In that frenzy of online engagement, two truths emerged. Miguel's face, bruised and tear-streaked, became an emblem of vulnerability and courage. And the captain's badge, once a symbol of trust, had become a glaring reminder of power abused. Social media had done more than document brutality. It had awakened a sleeping giant of public accountability, proving that a single smartphone camera could ignite revolution. By dawn the next day, hand-lettered signs began appearing along the main thoroughfare. Justice for Miguel. Stop hate crimes now. Defund abusive cops. A hush fell over the neighborhood as word spread of a protest gathering at the very corner where the assault occurred. Neighbors donned matching red t-shirts bearing Miguel's photograph, an image showing both the severity of his injuries and the gentle kindness that defined him. On the steps of City Hall, hundreds assembled with raised fists. A local pastor led a prayer, voice trembling with emotion. Lord, we lift up Miguel, who suffers in body but not in spirit. We ask for courage to stand against hate, wisdom to reform our systems, and compassion to heal our community. Tears flowed freely among the crowd. In the front row, Rosa, Miguel's cousin, wiped her cheeks as she clutched a framed family photo. She never spoke that morning. Her silence alone spoke volumes about the personal toll of public violence. Speakers took turns at the microphone, community organizers, civil rights lawyers, longtime residents whose parents had faced discrimination decades earlier. One woman, voice-breaking, recounted a childhood where her own brother, a carpenter, was harassed by police because of his accent and dark skin. She warned the crowd that what happened to Miguel could happen to anyone in that neighborhood unless action was taken. Meanwhile, chants echoed down the streets. No justice, no peace, hands up, don't abuse, hate has no home here. The rhythmic cadence of drums, played by local teens, lent a pulse to the march that wound through residential blocks before returning to the scene of the assault. Cars slowed, passengers craning their necks to grasp countless handmade posters. Some drivers honked in solidarity, others shook their heads in shame. Local businesses joined the cause. A bakery donated hundreds of sandwiches to marchers, while a barber shop offered free haircuts to anyone who showed up with "Justice for Miguel" painted on a cardboard sign. Flyers plastered on utility poles under the streetlight spelled out demands: immediate suspension of officers with prior complaints, body cameras on every patrol car, mandatory bias training every 6 months. City officials tried to maintain balance. The mayor issued a statement expressing deep horror at the footage, promising a swift, transparent inquiry. But many in the crowd scoffed, uneasy after years of broken promises. They remembered past investigations that led nowhere. In a corner, a local parent handed out flyers detailing protest guidelines: how to remain peaceful, how to respond to possible arrests, how to document any police overreach. The organizers wanted maximum turnout but minimum conflict, intent on sending a powerful message without giving authorities any excuse to clamp down. By late afternoon, the march culminated in a candlelight vigil at the corner store. Participants lit candles, each flicker representing a story of pain or resilience. A choir sang "Amazing Grace," voices rising to fill the evening air. Some held hugs, others knelt to pray. The vigil's hush contrasted sharply with the riotous energy that preceded it, but both forms of protest carried equal weight. The message was clear: this community would not rest until Miguel saw justice, and until the captain faced accountability for betraying his badge. In hours of the video going viral, the department's internal affairs unit activated an emergency protocol. Agents arrived at the precinct before most officers had finished their morning coffee. Martinez's badge, service weapon, and cruiser keys were confiscated on the spot. He was escorted to a secure location for questioning, an extraordinary step, given his rank. Investigators combed through dispatch logs and body camera footage, confirming that Martinez's device had been turned off at the time of the assault. In interviews, his partner, a patrol officer who had worked alongside him for 3 years, expressed shock. "We were on the opposite side of the block," the partner said. "He didn't radio for backup. It was like something in him snapped." Other officers, summoned for statements, offered conflicting accounts. Some claimed they heard a call for help on their radios but assumed it was routine. Others admitted a sense of guilt that they hadn't responded sooner. Simultaneously, civilian witnesses were invited to give testimony. The neighbor who captured the video, hands shaking, described the moment in vivid detail. I saw him hit Miguel like he was striking a bag of sand, blow after blow. I thought, is this real life? Her recollection was corroborated by two other neighbors whose separate recordings captured different angles. These independent accounts created an airtight timeline. Martinez had parked his cruiser at exactly 7:12 a.m., approached Miguel by 7:13, and committed the assault between 7:14 and 7:15, rapidly returning to his vehicle at 7:16. Medical reports became crucial evidence. Paramedics had arrived within minutes, documenting contusions across Miguel's ribs, a fractured collarbone, and a concussion. Teary-eyed doctors noted that, given Miguel's disability and fragile musculature, a similar assault could have been fatal. Prosecutors pored over these records, preparing to argue that Martinez knowingly targeted a vulnerable individual, thereby meeting the criteria for an aggravated hate crime. Public pressure accelerated the process. Within 48 hours, the local district attorney announced the assignment of a special prosecutor to avoid any conflict of interest. A team of digital forensics experts analyzed the neighborhood cameras and social media metadata, verifying exactly when the footage was posted and ensuring it hadn't been doctored. Meanwhile, community leaders formed an independent oversight committee to monitor the investigation's progress and hold both the department and the DA's office accountable. Legal scholars weighed in, noting that precedents in similar cases often hinged on proving the perpetrator's motive. Investigators delved into Martinez's past social media posts and text messages. One message from months earlier surfaced. "I'm tired of these freeloaders getting away with crimes," sent after a minor traffic incident involving a Hispanic driver. Another late-night text read, "They don't belong here," referencing migrants seeking asylum. Civil rights attorneys pounced on these messages, arguing they showed a pattern of bias. By the end of the week, the investigation had collected intimate details: Martinez's daily schedule, his known associations, his performance evaluations. Interviews with family members and friends painted a portrait of a man disciplined on the outside, but simmering with resentment someplace deeper. The department's independent oversight committee reserved particular criticism for the fact that earlier complaints had never led to meaningful discipline. Their report, released in a brief press conference, accused leadership of willful negligence. As investigators prepared to present their evidence to a grand jury, the city watched anxiously. Each new disclosure intensified the sense that this was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of unchecked power. For Miguel and his supporters, the beginning of the investigation marked a fragile moment of hope that the truth would emerge fully and that, after years of silence, a high-ranking officer would finally answer for crimes against the vulnerable. When the district attorney stepped up to the podium to announce formal hate crime charges, a hush fell over the press corps gathered in the rain-slicked plaza. "We have sufficient evidence," the DA intoned, "to charge Captain Robert Martinez under Section 249 of the State Penal Code for a felony hate crime against a disabled Hispanic individual. This includes aggravated assault, use of excessive force, and violation of civil rights." Flashbulbs popped as journalists scribbled notes, the gravity of those words sinking in. Just moments earlier, civil rights attorneys had met with Miguel and his family in a small conference room. Miguel sat upright in his wheelchair, eyes rimmed with fatigue but shining with defiance. His attorney, a steely woman named Lucia Vega, explained what the charges meant: potential prison time of up to 10 years, mandatory hate crime sentencing enhancements, and forced resignation from the department. Miguel's voice cracked, but he insisted on reading a statement. "They tried to break me," he said, "but they only made me stronger. I stand here not just for myself, but for every person who's been beaten because of who they are or how they look." Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered under umbrellas, brandishing signs that read, "Hate has no place here," and "One charge at a time." Protesters chanted in unison, celebrating what they felt was a victory for justice, yet wary of a legal system that had often let officers walk free. Opponents of the charges, including a small contingent of police supporters, held a separate rally across town. They argued that Martinez had been unfairly vilified by a single video and that a complete investigation would reveal mitigating circumstances. Tensions crackled as both sides prepared for a legal battle that promised to define the region's approach to policing for years to come. Inside the courtroom, the judge read the formal indictment line by line. Count 1, aggravated battery. Count 2, civil rights violation. Count 3, hate crime enhancement. Each charge carried its own elements, proof that Martinez attacked because of Miguel's ethnicity and disability. The prosecutor displayed still frames from the neighbor's video, highlighting Martinez's unmistakable glare of anger as he approached Miguel. Defense attorneys argued that the captain had acted in a moment of split-second confusion, that he perceived a threat due to a miscommunication, and that there was no premeditated bias. They questioned whether Miguel's condition truly qualified under the hate crime statute. Witness list grew. The neighbor who recorded the video pledged to testify, as did paramedics who treated Miguel that morning. Neurosurgeons were subpoenaed to discuss the severity of Miguel's injuries. A psychologist prepared to evaluate Martinez for any signs of anger management issues or deep-seated prejudice. Higher-ranking officers were called to discuss departmental culture and complaints history. As the docket filled, it became clear that this trial would last weeks, maybe months. News outlets ran live streams of the arraignment. Legal analysts dissected every nuance, debating whether prosecutors had enough evidence of bias. Civil rights groups hailed the charges as the first time a captain in this precinct had faced a hate crime indictment in living memory. Yet skeptics pointed out that out-of-court settlements often diluted accountability. Would this case be different? Would Martinez truly face consequences beyond retirement benefits revoked? By the end of the day, the courtroom cleared, leaving behind a mix of relief and apprehension. Miguel's family hugged him while tears streamed down their faces. Martinez was led away in handcuffs, expression unreadable behind dark sunglasses. In that fleeting moment, captured by every camera and whispered about in every corner of social media, justice felt both immediate and precarious. The hate crime charges had been filed, but the path ahead remained uncertain. First day of trial opened with a palpable tension that filled the packed courtroom. Rows of seats were reserved for press, community leaders, and family members on both sides. Miguel arrived in court flanked by his legal team, his wheelchair gleaming under fluorescent lights. His mother, dressed in simple black, clutched his cousin Rosa's hand, her knuckles white with fear and hope. On the opposite side, Martinez sat at the defense table, suit immaculate, mask of stoicism firmly in place. Opening statements set the tone. The prosecutor's voice rang clear. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about power and prejudice. Captain Martinez, sworn to uphold the law, violated his oath by unleashing violence on a disabled Hispanic man, simply because he could. Images from the assault flashed on a projector, Miguel's frantic eyes, Martinez's clenched fists, the wheel of that overturned chair. The jury watched in solemn silence. When the defense attorney began, his approach was markedly different. We ask you to consider that Captain Martinez acted out of confusion and miscommunication. He believed Miguel was interfering with officers earlier that morning wrongly, as it turned out. But belief alone is not hate. There is no evidence of a racial epithet, no proof of a calculated motive. This was an unfortunate incident, not a hate crime. His words hung in the air, met with sharp glances from spectators who remembered the raw video footage. Witnesses took the stand. First, the neighbor who recorded the assault recounted her shock. She described seeing the captain's face twist with anger and hearing Miguel's cry of surprise. When pressed by defense counsel, she insisted she couldn't identify any legitimate reason for the attack. She testified that Miguel never threatened the captain in any way. Her testimony was bolstered by a second neighbor who echoed the same timeline. Paramedics then described Miguel's injuries: a fractured collarbone, deep bruises across his torso, and lingering symptoms of a mild traumatic brain injury. One EMT choked back tears while recounting how Miguel's wheelchair was still warm from the scuff marks left by the captain's blows. The defense questioned the severity, suggesting Miguel's injuries might have been exaggerated. The paramedic shot back, "You saw the photos. You saw him fighting for breath." The prosecution called a forensic psychologist next. Based on Martinez's text messages and social media history, the psychologist testified there was evidence of implicit bias. One message exhibited contempt toward Hispanic migrants, another criticized disabled individuals for slowing down society. The psychologist explained that such patterns, combined with the unprovoked nature of the assault, met the threshold for hate crime intent. The defense countered by presenting a character witness, an officer who had known Martinez for 10 years, describing him as fair and respectful to all. Yet the jurors could see the counter testimony felt rehearsed, overshadowed by hard evidence. Mid-trial, Miguel took the stand. His voice trembled as he recounted the moment he felt the wheelchair jerk from under him. He described the taste of blood, The shock of realizing a man sworn to protect was instead inflicting cruelty. When asked how this changed him, he said, "I trusted I could walk, well, push my wheels on that street every day. Now, I question if safety exists when someone wears a badge." The courtroom fell silent. A tear traced down his mother's cheek. Even some prosecution team members dabbed their eyes. On the fifth day, Martinez finally testified. His voice was measured, eyes fixed on a point above the jurors. He claimed he thought Miguel was reaching for something under his wheelchair, possibly a weapon. Under cross-examination, he admitted he had no direct sight of any object in Miguel's hands. When asked why he targeted a man visibly in a wheelchair, Martinez deflected. Adrenaline took over. "I reacted to perceived danger." Jurors exchanged uncertain glances. His explanation felt hollow. Legal analysts following live streams predicted the jury would struggle to reconcile Martinez's rank and prior commendations with his unchecked violence. The hate crime enhancement hinged on whether they believed his actions were motivated by prejudice or a misunderstanding. Civil rights advocates declared the proceeding groundbreaking. It forced jurors to confront systemic bias at the highest level. By the end of the first week, both sides rested. Jury deliberations began Monday morning. Outside the courthouse, supporters of Miguel circled with signs emphasizing that disabled and minority communities deserved protection, not persecution. Polls taken among onlookers suggested 70% believed Martinez was guilty of a hate crime. Inside, however, 12 individuals would carry the ultimate decision. While the jury locked themselves in deliberations, the broader community refused to remain silent. Neighborhood meetings convened in churches, community centers, and living rooms. Town halls streamed online as local leaders addressed concerns ranging from police accountability to mental health resources. Residents spoke candidly about fear that any of them, regardless of background, could fall victim to unchecked authority. Faith-based organizations mobilized. A coalition of churches organized a prayer march to the precinct, demanding transparency and genuine reform. Catholic, Baptist, and Pentecostal congregations joined forces, sending a message that faith communities stood united against hate and violence. Their banners bore phrases like, "God sees all, let justice roll," and "No mercy for hate." Each prayer was a plea for a new relationship between law enforcement and civilians, one built on mutual respect. Meanwhile, small business owners formed a support network for Miguel and his family. A local construction company pledged to make Miguel's home wheelchair accessible free of charge. Grocery stores donated gift cards to cover his living expenses during the lengthy trial. Pilots at a nearby airport even offered to fly Miguel and his family to a rehabilitation facility in another state at no cost if local services proved inadequate. Activist organizations filed Freedom of Information Act requests to obtain disciplinary records of other officers in the precinct. They uncovered a troubling trend of repeated complaints about excessive force that had been quietly dismissed. These revelations fueled a second wave of protests, this time calling for departmental leadership changes rather than individual punishment alone. They demanded the resignation of the police chief, who many believed was complicit in protecting officers from accountability. Social media campaigns continued to flourish. Supporters posted daily, "I stand with Miguel" updates, highlighting facts about hate crimes and disability rights. Influencers with millions of followers shared links to legal defense fundraisers, ensuring that pleas for donations reached a national audience. Hashtags evolved from hashtag Justice for Miguel to hashtag Reform the Force. Prominent celebrities tweeted solidarity, with some promising to match donations if certain fundraising goals were reached. At City Hall, a task force was convened to assess internal affairs procedures. Community representatives sat alongside city council members and police union leaders. Debates were intense. Some union reps resisted external oversight, accusing activists of disrespecting the badge, while community delegates insisted that trust could only be restored through genuine transparency. The task force's meetings were live-streamed, exposing the raw conflicts that often remain hidden in backroom negotiations. In parallel, mental health counselors set up free clinics for residents traumatized by the violence. Stories poured in from other affected families. A Latino teenager who was racially profiled at age 13, a veteran with PTSD who was tackled unnecessarily by patrol officers, and a single mother afraid to report domestic abuse for fear police would dismiss or abuse her instead of helping. These narratives became interwoven with Miguel's, painting a larger picture of a system in dire need of intervention. As days stretched into weeks, community gatherings evolved into strategic planning sessions. Lawyers trained volunteers to observe police interactions, teaching them how to document incidents without confrontation. Neighborhood watch groups formed agreements with local precincts to share real-time updates instead of defaulting to 911. Schools introduced curricula on civic rights and mental health, hoping to foster a new generation more informed about justice and empathy. Throughout all this activity, Miguel himself remained at the center. He attended rallies via video chat from his hospital bed, offering words of encouragement. "I want to see this place where my parents taught me to love become a community that values every life." His resilience became the rallying cry, a reminder that a single voice could galvanize an entire neighborhood. When the jury finally emerged after 3 days of deliberation, the verdict was read aloud: guilty on all counts, including the hate crime enhancement. Tears streamed down Miguel's cheeks as he smiled shakily, relief washing over him in waves. His mother wept with thanksgiving, while Rosa wrapped her arms around him. The courtroom emptied slowly, replaced by a flood of reporters and supporters celebrating the rare conviction of a high-ranking officer for a hate crime. For Miguel, justice marked the end of one painful chapter and the beginning of another: healing. Physical therapy sessions intensified, focusing on rebuilding strength in bruised muscles and calming post-concussion headaches. A speech therapist helped him regain clarity of speech after the trauma, working with patience and compassion. Psychologists met with him weekly, guiding him through nightmares that replayed the assault and helping him identify triggers. Slowly, he began to sleep through the night again. Community members volunteered to accompany him to appointments. Pastor Ramirez drove him to therapy in a minivan equipped with a ramp, turning what could have been isolating sessions into moments of shared fellowship. Miguel's nonprofit resumed operations under temporary leadership, delivering meal packages while he regained the ability to coordinate remotely. His determination spurred countless volunteers to keep the program's mission alive until he was able to return in person. Martinez, sentenced to 8 years in a state facility, appealed his conviction but failed. The state's appellate court upheld the verdict, emphasizing that no badge shielded him from accountability. Behind bars, friends reported he was quiet, spending long hours reflecting in solitude. Meanwhile, the department's leadership changed. A newly appointed police chief, selected after community protests, introduced a series of reforms: mandatory body cameras on all patrol units, quarterly bias training led by certified experts, and an independent civilian review board with the power to investigate complaints. Schools launched programs teaching students about civil rights, using Miguel's story as a case study. In high school civics classes, teachers displayed still images from the assault footage, prompting discussions about prejudice, power, and responsibility. College campuses hosted panels with legal experts analyzing the case's implications for hate crime statutes and disability protections. Student groups recognized the need to ally across difference, organizing cultural exchange events to foster empathy. At the local level, City Council passed an ordinance requiring that any officer with more than one credible complaint be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. A civilian ombudsman office was established to oversee complaints and publish quarterly transparency reports. These measures, while far from perfect, signaled a commitment to learning from the past. Community leaders cautioned against complacency, acknowledging that systemic change requires ongoing vigilance. For many residents, healing came through shared activities. Block parties returned to the once tense neighborhood, this time with banners reading, "We are stronger together." Music and laughter replaced chants of protest as families barbecued in front yards, children played tag on sidewalks, and local bands performed in impromptu street concerts. These gatherings were not mere celebrations, they were acts of defiance against the fear that had threatened to consume the community. Miguel, now stronger in body and spirit, reorganized his nonprofit to include disability advocacy. He partnered with local law firms to offer pro bono legal aid to families facing discrimination. He spoke at national conferences on disability rights, weaving his personal story into a broader call for inclusive policy. His website featured a blog detailing his rehabilitation journey, offering hope to anyone battling through a crisis. Through it all, the wound of betrayal, a badge turning into a weapon, would never fully disappear. Yet in its place grew something new: solidarity. Neighbors once indifferent found themselves acting as a single entity, protecting one another and demanding better from those in power. In the end, it wasn't just the law that healed, It was the collective compassion and action of a community refusing to let hate define them. In the months following the trial, conversations shifted from outrage to policy. City council meetings and police commission hearings became television spectacles, broadcast live as everyone watched to see if promises of reform would translate into concrete action. The new police chief, once a vocal critic of his department's culture, now faced scrutiny to deliver on commitments. The first major reform: every patrol vehicle was outfitted with dual cameras, one body-worn and one dashboard-mounted. This redundancy aimed to prevent any future momentary lapses in recording. Officers received training on de-escalation techniques taught by professionals from conflict resolution nonprofits. Evaluations emphasized empathy, not just tactical skill. Metrics for performance expanded to include community feedback and mental health checks, rather than focusing solely on arrest quotas. Yet challenges persisted. A substantial portion of patrol officers resisted the changes, grumbling about second-guessing and bureaucracy. Union representatives pushed back, arguing the new policies undermined officer safety. Negotiations became tense. On several occasions, union leaders walked out of bargaining sessions. But community advocates, bolstered by Miguel's unwavering presence, countered with data. Complaints of excessive force decreased by 35% in the 3 months following implementation of body camera usage. Independent audits verified these numbers. Legislators at the state level took notice. Inspired by this case, they introduced bills to tighten hate crime definitions, explicitly including disability as a protected class. Public defenders demanded training to ensure lawyers recognized subtle forms of bias. Disability rights groups lobbied for broader accessibility in public spaces, pointing out that systemic neglect often made it harder for disabled individuals to seek justice. As these bills were debated, Miguel testified in the state capitol, recounting his ordeal in a powerful speech that left legislators visibly moved. National attention followed. News outlets compared this case to other high-profile instances of police brutality, but emphasized its unique intersection of disability rights and hate crime legislation. Experts wrote op-eds calling for a police code of ethics reinforced by enforceable penalties. Law schools added modules on policing and disability rights to their criminal justice curricula. While some critics claimed this attention would fade, the sustained activism of community coalitions kept the story alive. On the ground, local programs sprang up to bridge gaps between officers and civilians. Coffee with a Cop events became monthly staples, encouraging informal dialogue. Residents shared breakfast with patrol officers, discussing neighborhood concerns and personal stories. Workshops on implicit bias attracted dozens, including several veteran officers who later admitted they misunderstood how their words and actions might be perceived. This training emphasized real-life scenarios, interacting with someone in a wheelchair, communicating with non-English speakers, recognizing signs of mental distress. Budget allocations reflected shifting priorities. Funds were redirected to hire mental health professionals to ride along with police units, aiming to provide immediate de-escalation for calls involving individuals struggling with psychological crises. Community violence intervention teams, composed of social workers, mediators, and formerly incarcerated individuals, expanded to address root causes of conflict. Early results indicated fewer violent confrontations, though critics warned it was too soon to declare victory. Still, not all outcomes were positive. A few officers resigned in protest, joining private security firms where body cameras were not required. Insurance premiums for the department rose after the Martinez verdict, because carriers viewed the risk of future civil suits as too high. Some questioned whether these financial strains might ultimately harm community policing efforts in underfunded areas. Yet, most agreed that accountability outweighed cost concerns. As a symbolic gesture, the precinct's badge policy was overhauled. Badges were redesigned to include an inscription, "To protect with honor, not harm." It was a small change, but it signified a larger cultural shift, one that recognized the badge as a promise, not a weapon. Former officers who had committed to reform were invited to mentor recruits, sharing first-hand accounts of how unchecked bias could corrode trust and morale. 1 year after the assault, a commemoration ceremony was held at the corner store where it all began. The city installed a bronze plaque reading, "In memory of those who suffered at the hands of prejudice. May we learn from our past to build a just future." Miguel placed a single white rose at its base, his eyes bright with both sorrow and hope. Neighbors gathered around, some hugging, others wiping away tears. Speakers emphasized the ongoing journey of reform, acknowledging that while victories had been won, the fight against systemic bias continued. In the final analysis, the case of Captain Martinez and Miguel became more than a legal milestone. It became a blueprint for how communities, activists, and law enforcement could forge a new path. It demonstrated that a single phone recording could break institutional inertia, that collective outrage could spur reform, and that a disabled Hispanic man's dignity could inspire a city to redefine justice. The lessons learned resonate far beyond those streets. Power must be checked, compassion must be cultivated, and vigilance must never waver. As the city moved forward, Miguel continued his advocacy work. He traveled to other states, sharing his story with policymakers and grassroots groups. Martinez, serving his sentence, remained a cautionary tale within department training manuals. And the community that once trembled in fear now stood as a testament to resilience, a reminder that even in our most vulnerable moments, unity and justice can prevail.